all your guys would come present and how they're doing here. And he always had a very good way of saying, that's not exactly the way it works. I forgot how he exactly did it, but it wasn't wasted time, got right to the point, was never rude, tough, but never rude, always evaluating the people, how they thought about a problem, how they thought about an issue, how they attacked the problem. You guys had tons of problems when we were there, and each one, how you attacked it. You had the GMS problem, then the distributor went bankrupt, and all these things. But you learn in life, how do people deal with problems? The board was completely open. It was a lot of fun. We went to taste your foods, and you always took us to branches, to restaurants, and you just learn how people think, and even if you don't join another board, I'm not in any other board now, I tell people it's a really good thing to see how other people do things, because I go to anything I go to where other CEOs are there, or the business roundtable or business council, stuff that you've done. I'm taking notes when I hear someone did X. I said, that's a neat idea.
Yeah.
Why don't we do? Matter of fact, at my board, I still do since we last met. So you did it every board meeting, and I've been doing it every board meeting since Bank One. I still do it today, and it was your idea, like how you. And for those on the podcast, it was telling the board honestly everything important since you last met. Good, bad, ugly. It could be the product, the food, the tasting, the profits, the China business, an honest assessment from the CEO. Like I said, the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's a great tool. I still type it out, and I still keep it. And in fact, I was speaking today about having some of the people who run the business here do it themselves since we last met, as opposed to a presentation.
Yeah.
So I still learn things from tons of other people, how to do things better. And
so you were on the beach, as they say in finance terms, when you didn't have the job. You come to the Yum board, you're working on that. What process did you use, and what did you learn from it as you worked your way into the CEO job at Bank One?
I was very deliberate. Okay, so I was fired in December, but I had to negotiate out. It took me till March or April, so I decided I'm going to take the summer off, take the kids around the world, and start kind of really thinking about it in September. But I did take a lot of phone calls. I took everyone respectfully. Some were, you could call it almost insulting what they were offering me. I made sure the headhunters knew I wanted to work, the major folks out there. When I came back in September, I was always polite and responsive to everyone. I had an office. I started seeing people all the time, and I had ideas. I'm going to start my own merchant bank. I wrote up documents. I spoke to people. I thought about working with people, getting partners, kind of wild in the idea. Didn't love it. I could have just been my own investor, started talking to people. I went to see Cameron Gone about what is it like. I didn't love it. I went to, I thought about just teaching or writing, fundamentally. And, I realized I was ready. I wasn't done with the big game yet. And I had a lot of offers. Some were CEO, some was, I was offered to run the global investment bank of one of the big European investment banks, one of the big European investment banks. And I went there to see the people in London and had dinner with a bunch of them. And after doing it, I said, there's no way I'd work for these guys. I mean, Hank Greenberg called me up at AIG, and I said, going from Sandy Weill to Hank Greenberg, you'd have to have your head examined. And Jeff Bezos, who I hit it off with in 1999, is looking for president. And he and I hit it off. I still talk to him. He's an outstanding guy. It was just a bridge too far for me. I didn't necessarily fully understand the business. I had to move the family to Seattle. I love the idea of never putting a suit on again, getting a houseboat somewhere. And there are tons of others that people actually spoke to me about, but it came down at the time to Home Depot and Bank One. And Home Depot, I love those people. I thought Bernie Marcus, Arthur Blank, I went down there, I was running with Blank and Ken Langone. I did knees bees. But when I first met them, I said, just so you guys know, because I want you to know this, until you called me, I'd never been in a Home Depot. I said, so it's not my natural habitat, merchant. And they were very much like, we don't care about that. You'll learn. We want the guy with the heart and the soul and the way they think. And I went to stores with them and stuff like that. And I actually shopped houses in Atlanta. I mean, we were taking it seriously, looked at schools for the kids. And then Bank One was there. And Bank One, as you know, was a troubled Midwestern bank and probably would have surprised people I went to it. But it was my natural habitat. When I look at a trading book or a loan book, I mean, I wasn't used to all the business they had. Moving to Chicago was going to be hard, but I wasn't done yet. And, they offered me chairman CEO, and I decided, I put half my net worth into it at the time. I tied my shoes to it. I was going to go with the ship or not. And very much like we did with Sandy Weil back at Commercial Credit Primerica, build it, make it what you can, build something great. Don't cry over spilled milk. I still deal with a lot of CEOs who they complain about their own companies endlessly. And I always put your pants on. I mean, just grow up. The world was never perfect. No one ever said they're going to hand you, everything on a silver platter. Business is tough. People disappoint you, and so I decided to go for that. They made me chairman CEO. I put half my money in, moved the family. I called you up, got you on the board. So I needed some fresh blood on the board.
That was a lot of fun watching what you did there. It was great, and then you turned around Bank One. It was a great success story, and J.P. Morgan Chase decides to come and acquire Bank One. What did you learn orchestrating that with the J.P. Morgan Chase CEO at the time, Bill Harrison? I mean, how'd you bring it all together?
Yeah, so Bill Harrison had been not my direct banker, but I knew him from way back. And as you know, Bill's a real quality guy, and so we did that deal at the end of in the summer of 2004. But he and I had started talking in 02 or 03. And I'd go see him regularly. And I had told you guys on the board that there are 2 or 3 very natural mergers for us. One was Fleet and one was J.P. Morgan Chase. And J.P. Morgan Chase fell by the wayside because they'd gotten too big and they'd bought Chase. But because Bank One did better and better, and they were having some tough times, it kind of came in that target range again. And so I went to see Bill. Bill and I kept on talking. He said to me at one point, hey, I can't do a deal now. My shareholders will kill me, but it's so natural. I don't have a successor, really. Would you promise me that you will call me if you're ever going to do something? And I told him, Bill, I cannot promise that, but I understand about the industrial logic. And he and I started talking about the industrial logic to people. Now, in reality, it was called. He called it a merge of equals. We got the premium, but we also got the control. If you remember correctly, I was ordained to be the CEO literally from day one. So I wasn't the CEO from day one, but the board was going to be 50-50, and I was going to be the CEO in 2 years unless 75% of the board said no. So that meant 4 of my directors would have to vote against me. And you may remember the last minute, there was a little fight at our board. You guys were at dinner at my house in Chicago, and we had.
Oh, I was a big part of that fight, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, but some people were like, don't do the deal. You can't trust these New Yorkers.
Oh, you can't. If Jamie can't be the CEO day one, we can't do the deal. Well, that was a good reason to keep keep it in Chicago.
Yeah,
I mean, they were coming up with all kinds of reasons, And I said, look, if Jamie can't work with Bill Harrison for 2 years, then there's something wrong with Jamie Dimon.
That's correct.
And they said, well, you remember, I'm not going to mention his name. He said, you've never been in a boardroom, like that. You're missing something here. I said, well, I do have a hell of a lot of common sense. And, there's a big fight. But anyway, the rest is history.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And you make a judgment call in life, and that we all thought I knew I could trust Bill Harrison. And he wanted to leave. They needed a successor, and they needed someone who's going to run it. And so Bank One had just gone from being a terrible company to a mediocre company. J.P. Morgan Chase was part of it. There are a lot of deals had taken place, but it never completely performed. So in reality, but the industrial logic was perfect. 2 not great credit card companies and credit card, enormous economy scale put together. We had a great retail system. They didn't, but they had great branches in New York. We both had middle market businesses. They had an investment bank. We didn't, but we could bring those products and services to the clients around the United States. They were global. We were not. And we just started working it. Like literally and I remember starting these, like you've had the business reviews by business, payments, systems, ops, by country, by investment banking, middle market banking, consumer banking, credit card, and never said we're going to transform, but just went to work at making it a better company, be an honest assessment, setting real targets for ourselves about what we should be performing, removing the management that was political and bureaucratic. But Bill and I spoke all the time. Like I was running most of that stuff, but he was completely supportive. In fact, there was one time that at a meeting, someone said, Jamie was very rude at this meeting we had. I was criticizing them for these insurance deals they thought they were doing to protect the company from auto warranties. And he went on and on that Jamie did this. And Bill said, excuse me, that did not happen. He said, well, you weren't there. He said, I was in the back of the room. And he was asking you a lot of very good and smart and tough questions. And Bill was a little surprised how deep I went into all these businesses. And at one point he said to me, are you going to do this all the time? I said, yeah. I said, pretty much till I leave. And very often he didn't always agree with the stuff I was doing, but he said, hey, it's your company. You're going to be CEO in a couple months, whatever. But then it came to one guy that I wanted to ask leave, who I thought was a great politician, but a complete self-server. Took care of his, the buddies of this, and was kind of a hatchet man for Bill himself. And I went to see Bill. I said, he's got to go. And Bill said, well, I totally disagree with you. He's been key here, blah, blah, blah. And I went home that night and I came back in the next day and I said, Bill, we've done everything together here. I'm really uncomfortable to completely disagree. I would feel much more comfortable if you go ask some of our other senior management people about what I said. Is he trusted? Is this? Is that? And Bill, to his credit, went out and spoke to 4 or 5 people and came back and said, you were right. And I should have known. And so we were kind of lockstep every step of the way. He did, and even since he left, which is now almost 20 years ago, he's been anything he could do to help. Yeah. And even guys like the guy who ran Dennis Weatherstone, I don't know if you knew him, who had been a former CEO of J.P. Morgan itself, called me up an attaboy every quarter. There's some very sweet guys there. John B. McCoy.
Yeah.
The older guy who started Bank One and literally went from one branch to whatever, 1,000. He would come see me every now and then just to say, you're doing a great job, kid.
That's great. One of the things that, being on the board and watching you in action, you establish gold standards, not within the financial industry, but also other categories that might be better at processing, or you pick whatever measure that you were going after, and you really drove those gold standards home. And you talk about working it. If somebody asked you about strategy in those days, you'd say, I don't really care about that strategy. Our strategy is always changing.